Your housing choices reveal more about your wealth than your bank account ever will. Because at every financial level, where you live isn't just about shelter. It's a signal, a strategy, and sometimes a trap you don't even realize you're in. Let's start where most people start: renting. You're in your 20s, maybe early 30s, and you found a place that costs roughly 30% of your income. That's the rule everyone told you, right? Except nobody mentioned that 30% leaves you with nothing left to build anything else. You're not poor, but you're stuck in a loop. Every month, you write a check to someone else's mortgage. The apartment is fine, the location is decent, but here's what's actually happening. You're paying for permission to exist in a space that will never be yours. The furniture comes from a mix of hand-me-downs and whatever was on sale. You tell yourself it's temporary. It's been temporary for 4 years now. Then something shifts. You get a raise, or you switch jobs, or maybe you just can't stomach another lease renewal. So you start looking at buying. Not because you're ready, but because renting feels like failure at this point. You qualify for a mortgage that terrifies you. The bank says you can afford $300,000. What they mean is they'll let you borrow that much. Whether you can actually afford it is a different question entirely. You buy a starter home in a neighborhood that's supposedly up and coming. That phrase always means the same thing. It's affordable now because nobody else wants to be there yet. You're betting on the future. The house needs work. You know this. The inspector's report reads like a horror novel, but you're already emotionally attached. You make the offer anyway. Now you're a homeowner. Congratulations, you're also house poor, which is a special kind of broke that comes with a mortgage statement and a lawn you have to mow. Every repair becomes a financial crisis. The water heater goes, there's $1,500. The roof starts leaking, that's $8,000 you don't have. You learn to live with things being slightly broken because fixing everything would require money you've already spent on the mortgage. But you're building equity. That's what everyone says. Except equity is just theoretical wealth you can't spend while you're living in the house. It's Schrodinger's net worth. Here's where it gets interesting. Some people stay at this level forever, paying down a 30-year mortgage on a house that appreciated just enough to keep up with inflation. Others make a different move. They rent out the first house and buy a second one. Now they're landlords, which sounds impressive until you're dealing with a tenant who stopped paying rent 3 months ago, and legally you can't do anything about it for another 60 days. The people who actually build wealth through real estate aren't doing it with one property. They're operating at a completely different scale, multiple units. Commercial holdings, property in markets that most people can't afford to visit, let alone invest in. They're not house poor because the houses aren't where they live. The properties are assets that generate income, appreciate in value, and get managed by people they pay to handle the problems. This is the gap most people never cross. The difference between owning a home and owning real estate as a wealth strategy. One is personal, the other is systematic. But even that's not the top. Because at the highest levels, housing stops being about investment returns entirely. It becomes about something else, something most people don't have the context to recognize even when they're looking right at it. What happens when the property isn't just valuable, it's legacy. When the estate has been in the family longer than anyone can remember. That's where the rules change completely. You inherit the property, but you don't inherit it alone. There are structures already in place, trusts established decades before you were born. Legal entities your great-grandfather set up in 1962 that still dictate what you can and cannot do with assets that technically belong to you but practically don't. You're not the owner, you're the beneficiary. That distinction matters more than you realized when the attorney first explained it. You can receive distributions, you cannot liquidate, you cannot sell the house in Geneva without a family council vote that requires unanimous consent. A clause your great-grandmother insisted on because she understood something about wealth that most people never learn. It's easier to destroy than to build, and one careless generation can undo 4 careful ones. The family office manages $800 million across real estate holdings in 3 countries, private equity allocations, and what they call legacy positions. Minority stakes in companies that haven't been publicly mentioned since the 80s. Investments held so long they've become invisible. They generate income that compounds quietly while nobody's watching. You're invited to observe a meeting, not to participate. To observe. Your father sits at the head of the table. You've never seen him in this context before. Suddenly you understand that wealth preservation is a completely different discipline than wealth creation. The self-made optimize for returns. They can afford to take risks because they've built from zero before. They know the way back. You can't go back to zero. Zero isn't a reset when you inherit. Zero is a multi-generational failure. A cousin wants to cash out her stake. Leave the structure entirely. Take her share and be done with the obligations. The family council discusses it civilly. The resistance is structural, not personal. The vote is 5-2. She stops coming to Christmas. You don't feel guilty about your vote. You feel something colder. Correctness. The family isn't a family in the normal sense anymore. It's a legal entity with governance documents, succession plans, communications protocols for when members speak to the press. The press rarely asks. That's intentional. Your name ends up on a building? You didn't put it there. The foundation did after a donation you approved in a meeting you don't remember. The philanthropy operates in 7 figures annually. The gifts are real, but they're also reputation management, tax efficiency, and generational marketing all at once. Someone asks what you do. You've learned to deflect the question so smoothly they assume you're middle class, you dress plainly, you drive something reasonable. New money announces itself, old money simply is. The wealthiest people you know are the ones nobody recognizes. You watch your grandchildren the way your grandfather watched you, looking for the one who can carry the weight without bending, the one who can hold the name without being consumed by it. Not all of them can. This is something nobody discusses directly, but everyone understands completely. You know things about the family that aren't in any document. Decisions made at earlier levels that preserve the fortune but cost something human. You rationalize them correctly at the time. You haven't stopped thinking about them since. You carry them with nowhere to put them down. The wealth will continue after you. That's the entire point. That's always been the point. Somewhere far below this, someone's reading about real estate investing. They think if they work hard enough, save smart enough, buy enough properties, they can build what you were born into. What they don't understand yet is that what they're trying to construct took 4 generations to make untouchable. They're building a ladder to a floor you started on. The floor was always the point. The ladder was never the way in. Where you live tells a story about money, but the story changes depending on who's reading it. Most people are writing theirs, one mortgage payment at a time, hoping the plot improves. Some are writing with intention, turning properties into strategies, and a few never had to write anything at all. The house was already there. The only question was whether they could keep it standing.